When you think of Italy, what comes to mind? Pasta? The Mafia? This guy? How about American Western films? Although it seems unlikely, it turns out that most of what we recognize as iconic Western cinema wasn't even filmed in the West, but instead in Europe, largely under the direction of Italian director Sergio Leone. Leone is most famous for three trademark choices, including the juxtaposition of close and long shots, the use of soundtrack to set the tone and heighten tension, and the use of morally ambiguous characters. My name's Ishan, and today I'm going to be showing you how Leone used these three trademarks to redefine a genre and change film forever. Sergio Leone was born in Rome in January 1929. He was born to the director Vincenzo Leone and the actress Edvige, giving him a gateway into the film industry. From an early age, Leone wasn't a big fan of Italy's then head of state Benito Mussolini. Maybe it's because Mussolini was a fascist dictator who ran the country with an iron fist. Or maybe it's because he couldn't pronounce the word spaghetti. In any case, Leone's views pushed him towards the growing neo-realist movement in Italian cinema. For context, Italian neo-realism was a national film movement characterized by the depiction of working-class struggles in a realistic way, as a reaction to the idealistic propaganda films that dominated the prior decade. Leone would eventually diverge from pure neo-realism, but would retain some elements, such as location shooting and the use of non-professional actors. Leone uses close-ups and long shots in conjunction to create tension in grand moments in his movies. The alternation between these two shots has an accordion-like effect, where the viewer is pulled inside of a scene, then pushed out of it, and then pulled back in again. This effect creates a sense of unease in the audience, which is the perfect atmosphere for a tense standoff or the moments leading up to a duel. Leone also uses the juxtaposition of close-ups and long shots to purvey subtle changes in a scene, especially regarding the dynamic of power. For example, in this scene, we get a close-up of the villain's face showing a nervous expression and sweat, followed by a long shot showing our protagonist moving towards the center of the frame. In conjunction, both of these shots show a shifting dynamic in power from the villain to the protagonist. Leone wasn't a big fan of using dialogue to communicate with the audience in his movies. In his words, wrong quote. When you manage to express something with a look and the music instead of saying it with words or having the characters speak, I think it's a more complete work. So to tell his stories the way he wanted, Leone relied largely on Ennio Morricone, an Italian composer. As I mentioned earlier, the soundtracks in Leone's movies were useful for creating tension and heightening climactic moments. But Morricone was also good at composing pieces that evoked emotion, for more sad or solemn scenes. Here's a scene from Leone's last movie and his most prominent non-Western, Once Upon a Time in America, where he forgoes dialogue entirely and uses music to convey the emotional subtext of a scene. Additionally, Leone used musical leitmotifs to represent themes within his movies. In Once Upon a Time in America, there are repeated melodies that represent the costs of being loyal to a gang,
Bugsy coming, run!
as well as the powerful bonds of camaraderie.
Today they ask us to get rid of Joe. Tomorrow they ask me to get rid of you. Is that okay with you? Because it's not okay with me. Let's just forget about it. go for a swim?
Through his prioritization of soundtrack over dialogue, which was unusual for his time, Leone revealed the storytelling value of music.
Where are you going?
The row hose to look for a job.
Leone once said, probably the greatest writer of westerns himself was Homer. His characters were never all good or all bad. They're half and half, these characters, as all human beings are. Leone was a firm believer in the idea that there were no good or bad people, but rather that people were capable of making both good and bad choices. Sometimes these choices are beneficial for other people.
Why do you do this for us?
Why? Because I knew someone like you once, and there was no one there to help. Now get moving.
Sometimes these choices are selfish. In the end, Leone's characters are meant to represent the natural selfishness and moral grayness of human beings. As you might have noticed, Leone's stories all revolve around lowlives of some kind. Criminals, vagrants, and killers, and that type. This is where Leone pushes his idea to its logical extreme. Criminals are generally viewed as bad people who rob and kill seemingly without thought. Leone takes this interpretation and challenges it by offering the context behind criminal actions, as well as showing the kinder side of his tough characters. In the end, he doesn't try to deny that criminals are bad. He doesn't try to redeem his characters or show any kind of morality. Rather, he only tries to broaden the audience's view and challenge their prejudices. Leone died in April of 1989, but his themes and cinematography techniques would live on through future directors such as Quentin Tarantino and Martin Scorsese. Although his films were rejected by the American critics of his time, they would come to be accepted after some re-evaluation in the 70s. Even then, he continued to be a controversial figure. He portrayed the West as a savage frontier without any of the self-justification of classic westerns, and his refusal to dilute his movies with messages of civilization and manifest destiny was unacceptable to most critics. Ultimately, Leone's westerns embodied his love of the American dream and fear of American reality. He celebrated the dream of limitless freedom, but also exposed the murderous individualism that felt inherent to being an American. His message is ambiguous. In the end, his aim was to demystify rather than teach. Leone first began writing westerns because he wanted to explore the mythology of America. Now, almost 50 years after his first western, Leone and his work have been embedded into that mythology, to be remembered for centuries to come.
Would you shut up? No, wait. I'm not talking to you. Well, who's this?
Wait a minute.